The formation of the German doctrine of assault artillery in the interwar period took place against the background of a profound reassessment of the experience of the First World War. For officers of the Reichswehr, the events of 1914 to 1918 were not merely a tragic memory, but an object of sober analysis. It was there, at Verdun, on the Somme, and in Artois, that a fundamental problem of infantry offensives became fully apparent. Conventional field artillery was unable to keep pace with the battle. Towed guns possessed considerable destructive power, yet at the decisive moment of a breakthrough, they often proved ineffective. They lagged behind advancing infantry, became bogged down in shell craters, lost their draft animals under fire, and entered the fight too late. As a result, infantry units repeatedly found themselves confronting machine gun nests and field fortifications precisely when the outcome of an attack was decided within minutes. The Reichswehr command, constrained by the Treaty of Versailles but not intellectually restricted, sought not a wonder weapon, but a practical solution. What was required was an instrument that could be organically integrated into infantry combat, operating at direct fire ranges, under small arms and mortar fire. Infantry needed a means of immediate support, capable of advancing at the same pace and reacting instantly to newly discovered firing positions. At the same time, work was underway in Germany on tank platforms conceived primarily as instruments of maneuver warfare and breakthrough. The artillery command, however, approached the problem from a different perspective. Its requirements were markedly pragmatic. The vehicle had to be low in profile, capable of blending into the terrain and exploiting folds in the ground. A high silhouette was regarded as a fatal disadvantage on a battlefield increasingly saturated with anti-tank weapons. The armament was to be mounted in a fixed, hull-integrated installation. The rejection of a rotating turret was a deliberate choice, aimed at simplifying the design, reducing the height of the vehicle, and minimizing the number of vulnerable mechanical components. This decision defined a fundamentally different mode of employment, not a maneuver duel, but deliberate direct fire. The choice of a short-barreled gun likewise stemmed from combat experience. The weapon was not intended for engaging enemy armor, but for suppressing defensive positions. High explosive effect was considered more important than armor penetration. The short barrel allowed the use of shells with a substantial explosive charge, capable of destroying embrasures, parapets, and concrete shelters even with near hits. Such fire was intended to break open the enemy's defenses, clearing a path for the infantry step by step. All these requirements reflected not theoretical constructs, but a drive for maximum practicality. Assault artillery was conceived as an extension of the infantry, a protected fire support instrument operating within the direct line of sight of unit commanders. Speed of reaction, concealment, and the ability to change positions rapidly were seen as decisive factors for survival and success. The choice of a base chassis followed logically from this philosophy. The Panzerkampfwagen III chassis already existed, had been mastered by industry, and demonstrated acceptable reliability. Using an established platform avoided prolonged development cycles and allowed efforts to focus on adapting the vehicle to artillery requirements. Under conditions of limited resources and formal Allied oversight, this decision also carried strategic significance. A fixed armored superstructure was mounted on the chassis. This solution simplified construction, reduced weight, and enabled more efficient armor distribution, concentrating protection on the frontal arc, the direction from which the main threat was expected when supporting infantry at the forward edge of the battlefield. Fewer complex mechanisms also meant greater reliability under combat conditions. It was of fundamental importance that the new vehicle remained part of the artillery arm rather than the armored forces. Its crews were recruited from artillerymen with classical training. These men were accustomed to thinking in terms of fire missions, ranges, and coordination with observers. They viewed the battlefield not as an arena for maneuver duels, but as a system of targets requiring precise and timely engagement. This specialization emphasized the artillery nature of the vehicle. Rapid flanking maneuvers and deep breakthroughs were not expected of it. Instead, accuracy, composure, and close coordination with infantry were paramount. The commander of an assault gun had to quickly identify the source of enemy fire and direct the gun to a point where a few well-placed rounds could alter the situation on a given sector of the front. The combat debut of the first production vehicles came during the French campaign of 1940. Their short-barreled guns were not intended for tank combat, and this posed no problem. The StuG III was required to accompany infantry, suppress fortifications, destroy machine gun positions, and enable progress where divisional artillery could not deploy in time or was limited by poor visibility. It was in fighting for fortified villages and resistance nodes that the concept demonstrated its effectiveness most clearly. The low silhouette allowed the vehicles to approach enemy positions by exploiting terrain and built-up areas. A few high-explosive rounds were often sufficient to collapse resistance that had previously stalled the infantry. Infantry units quickly appreciated the value of this new mobile fire support asset. The StuG III was not perceived as a tank, but as a mobile gun that could be brought precisely where immediate intervention was required. Its appearance frequently altered the tactical situation within minutes, allowing an advance to continue with reduced losses. This experience confirmed the viability of the concept. Assault guns integrated naturally into the mechanics of blitzkrieg, not as independent striking forces, but as force multipliers for infantry. Firepower no longer waited in the rear. It advanced alongside the attacking troops. During the early years of the war, development proceeded along an evolutionary path. German engineers avoided radical alterations to a successful design, instead addressing shortcomings revealed in combat. Observation devices and sights were improved, crew ergonomics refined, and fatigue reduced. These changes had a direct impact on effectiveness in close combat. Protection was gradually enhanced as well. Frontal armor thickness increased in response to the growing prevalence of anti-tank weapons. At the same time, a balance between protection and mobility was maintained. The vehicle still had to operate at infantry pace rather than become a heavy, sluggish platform. Operational reality, however, increasingly imposed its own demands. On many sectors, encounters with enemy armored vehicles became unavoidable. Here, the limitations of the original concept became especially evident. The short-barreled gun was ineffective against even early war tanks, let alone more heavily armored vehicles. This compromise was understood as deliberate, but its durability was soon to be tested. With the launch of Operation Barbarossa, the 1941 German invasion of the Soviet Union, the assault gun encountered a challenge not foreseen in its original design, one that would fundamentally alter its role on the battlefield. On the Eastern Front, German forces faced a reality for which previous combat experience offered little preparation. Large masses of Soviet armored vehicles emerged from the depths of Soviet territory. Among them, the T-34 and KV-1 stood out, combining sloped armor with firepower capable of defeating German vehicles at distances previously considered relatively safe. Their appearance constituted not merely a tactical surprise, but a serious shock to the existing German system of armaments. German anti-tank weapons struggled to keep pace with this new reality. Guns once considered adequate proved insufficient against the frontal armor of Soviet tanks. Attempts to compensate through maneuver or tactics were often unsuccessful, particularly given the scale of armored operations across vast distances. The problem was systemic and required a systemic response. Under these conditions, the artillery command was compelled to reconsider the role of the StuG III. Originally conceived as an infantry support weapon, it increasingly found itself at the forefront of anti-tank combat. This was not a planned evolution, but a forced response to battlefield pressures. The low silhouette and comparatively strong frontal armor made the assault gun one of the few available assets capable of attempting to counter Soviet armor in critical situations. This shift exposed the gap between original intent and wartime reality. Where the StuG III had once engaged machine gun nests and fortifications, it was now expected to stop heavily armored vehicles. For the crews, this meant a dramatic change in the nature of combat and a sharp increase in risk. The short-barreled gun required engagement at dangerously close ranges, where any mistake could prove fatal. By 1942, it became clear that without major modernization, the vehicle could not remain viable under the new conditions. The introduction of more powerful guns began, determining the future path of the StuG III. The casemate layout, initially chosen for simplicity, revealed an additional advantage. It allowed the installation of a larger gun without the need for complex turret mechanisms. This accelerated rearmament and enabled relatively rapid adaptation of existing vehicles to frontline requirements. The transition to a long-barreled 75mm gun marked a turning point. The new weapon, derived from the PaK-40 anti-tank gun, fundamentally altered the combat capabilities of the vehicle. The increased muzzle velocity provided armor penetration previously unavailable to the StuG III. It could now reliably engage most Soviet medium tanks at ranges where the risk of return fire was reduced and enemy reaction times were longer. At the same time, the defining design feature was preserved. The absence of a turret maintained the vehicle's low silhouette despite the larger gun. This combination made the StuG III an especially effective ambush platform. It was not intended for maneuver battles in open terrain. Its strength lay in sudden, precise strikes from prepared positions. The economic dimension of this solution was equally significant. High component commonality and the lack of a turret allowed the new armament to be introduced without a complete reorganization of production. In the context of a protracted war, this made the StuG III an attractive asset. It could be produced and upgraded in large numbers at lower cost than fully fledged tanks. The low profile of the vehicle became a tactical advantage rather than a mere design feature. The StuG III could occupy positions in folds of terrain, behind embankments, among ruins, and within partially destroyed buildings where taller vehicles would be immediately detected. Often, only the edge of the superstructure or the gun barrel was visible, blending into the surroundings. In defensive combat, this conferred a tangible advantage. While the enemy searched for the source of fire, the crew could correct aim and prepare the next shot. These seconds between the first hit and return fire often determined the fate of not only the vehicle, but an entire sector of the front. Thus, the StuG III gradually evolved from an infantry support weapon into one of the central elements of German defensive tactics. It increasingly served as a mobile anti-tank reserve, capable of sealing dangerous sectors and stabilizing situations where other assets were unavailable. This transformation was forced, but illustrative of the adaptability imposed by wartime conditions. The growing role of the vehicle was accompanied by increased protection. Frontal armor thickness rose, and additional armor plates and anti-cumulative screens were introduced. These measures reflected the increasing density of anti-tank weapons on the battlefield, while efforts were made to preserve mobility and concealment. Each enhancement, however, involved compromise. Additional armor increased weight, accelerated wear on the suspension, and reduced reliability. Excessive mass would have undermined the vehicle's tactical flexibility, forcing engineers to maintain a carefully calibrated balance. Economic pressures increasingly shaped the fate of the vehicle. Producing complex tanks demanded scarce materials and skilled labor, both of which were in short supply. Against this backdrop, the StuG III represented a rational solution. It was simpler to manufacture, cheaper, and easier to repair, while its tactical value in defensive combat often rivaled that of heavier armored vehicles. Its mass production enabled the formation of independent assault gun battalions, subordinated directly to Army or Corps command. These units could be rapidly redeployed to threatened sectors and employed as mobile fire reserves. In maneuver defense, they often became the backbone around which temporary defensive lines were constructed. Increasingly, the StuG III was used as a tool for emergency stabilization of the front. Vehicles were committed hastily, sometimes straight from the march, to seal breakthroughs or hold critical terrain until reserves arrived. In such circumstances, assault guns exceeded their original auxiliary role and became a key component of the defensive system. Such employment inevitably led to rapid attrition. Vehicles operated at the limits of their capabilities, frequently without adequate maintenance. Mechanical wear increased, failures became more common, and crews were exposed to growing risks. This affected both technical readiness and casualty rates. Despite these pressures, during 1943 to 1944, the StuG III acquired a reputation as one of the most effective anti-tank weapons of the German army. Reports documented cases in which individual battalions destroyed substantial numbers of enemy tanks with comparatively limited losses. These successes reinforce the image of a reliable ambush platform capable of offsetting numerical inferiority through tactics and fire discipline. This effectiveness rested on multiple factors. Defensive combat limited enemy maneuver and rendered attacks more predictable. The low silhouette and high-quality optics allowed crews to remain concealed longer and fire first. Artillery-trained crews brought disciplined fire control and prioritization of targets. Yet this effectiveness had a cost. The StuG III was not a universal solution and was increasingly employed in conditions for which it was ill-suited. Vehicles were sent into urban fighting, subjected to heavy artillery and air attack, and used to cover withdrawals or seal the most dangerous sectors. Each such mission increased the likelihood of losses. The situation was exacerbated by the growing air threat. Allied air superiority made any movement hazardous. The StuG III was particularly vulnerable from above, and even near misses could disable a vehicle. Crews adapted through camouflage and nocturnal movement, but these measures became insufficient as air pressure intensified. Simultaneously, the supply system deteriorated. Fully serviceable vehicles were increasingly abandoned due to fuel or ammunition shortages. During retreats, such StuG III were destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture, further depleting unit strength. By late in the war, the quality of personnel declined sharply. Veteran crews had been largely lost in continuous fighting, replaced by hastily trained recruits. Inexperience manifested in poor position selection, reduced accuracy, and delayed reactions. In the confined casemate layout, errors often resulted in the loss of the entire crew. The StuG III remained an effective machine, but without trained crews, its advantages rapidly diminished. Rising losses reflected not inherent design flaws, but the cumulative effects of strategic collapse, economic exhaustion, and personnel degradation. By early 1945, of approximately 10,000 vehicles produced, only a fraction remained operational. Assault gun units had effectively become fire brigades, deployed to sectors on the brink of collapse. Their employment was increasingly desperate and accompanied by heavy casualties. Ultimately, the fate of the StuG III was profoundly dual. On one hand, it was among the most effective German anti-tank systems, well suited to defensive warfare. On the other, it suffered exceptionally high crew losses and was forced to perform tasks far beyond its original design intent. This history clearly illustrates how the evolution of war can radically transform the purpose of a weapon. The StuG III began as a specialized instrument of infantry support and ended its service as a symbol of forced adaptation, resilience, and the high price paid for holding the front under conditions of strategic defeat.